When God writes a check, God's check is generally so full of zeros that we can't comprehend the amount that God is about to bless our lives with. Relax. God got this. Relax. God, bad English, got this. Relax. God got this. You want to know why people don't relax and know that God got this? You want to know why? Because every now and then when we get a check that needs to be cashed, we go and we try to cash it only to discover that the check bounces because of insufficient funds. Because every now and then we let somebody write us a check on a closed account. And when we don't trust God, God will let us get with tricky people who will pull a Bernie Madoff on us and get us to feed into a Ponzi scheme. Get this, only to find out at the end when you need what it is you've been investing in, it's not there. But God has a way, brothers and sisters, of allowing you to go through enough bad checks to get to the point where you start to look at the name of the one who has written a check to you. And I want to suggest to some of us this morning that you have let too many people who were tricky in your life write you too many bad checks. And so now you ought to do like the old stores used to do. You ought to take a copy of that check and a picture of that person, and you ought to put it up on your refrigerator, and every time you see them calling you, you ought to see if the picture on the refrigerator match the picture on your phone, and you ought to send them the voicemail, because you can't write me no more bad checks. How you gonna let folk tell you that they love you when you can clearly see that they do not love you? How you gonna let people tell you that they want to see you succeed, but every time you see them they trying to trip you up? You ought to put a picture of their face on your refrigerator and put B-O-L-O. Be on the lookout for this joker. Just look at somebody and say bolo. And watch this. God has a reputation of cashing checks that he writes. But here's what scares us about the checks that God writes. When God writes a check, God's check is generally so full of zeros that we can't comprehend the amount that God is about to bless our lives with. Come here, Daniel. Daniel, we've been studying the book of Daniel, right? Daniel found himself facing a king who was having a nightmare. Y'all remember that? And the Bible goes on and says that God wrote Daniel a check that was 10 times greater than what everybody around him received. But get this, many of us, God is trying to bless us with 10 times more, but we can't believe it because we've never seen a check with that many zeros. But you ought to thank the Lord that he won't have you on welfare always. And if God is your daddy and he's paying child support, he'll bless you more than he's ever done before. So tell somebody, relax. God's got this. You want to know how I can relax and know that God's got this? Because every check that God has written, God has cleared. But hold up, because we are modern. And so we don't do like the old school saints who kept a checkbook. Because a checkbook had a check registry in it, and the check registry, I loved it because it told you every check that you wrote. But get this, it also told you what your balance was, and so you didn't have to wait on nobody to tell you how much money you still had in the bank, because your checkbook had a registry in it, and the registry told you all the checks that have already been clear. It told you every check that is still out. And get this, every now and then God wants you to look at his balance, and when you look at God's balance, you will get overwhelmed because you ain't never seen that many zeros. Well, we're just about out of our time, but thank you for yours.
Listen, join us on social media and you can keep up with the action-packed, fast-paced ministries here at Living Waters. We hope and pray that your life has been tremendously blessed. And lastly, consider joining the flow